Hi, my name is Haebichan Jung from towardsdatascience.com. I'm very excited to have Amit Jain, who is the former machine learning tech lead at TradeRev. I'm very excited to have him here today, so thanks for joining, man.
Thanks for having me here, Haebichan. How are you doing today?
Good, good. I'm in San Francisco. I know you're in Toronto, so I
Yeah,
don't
I'm in Toronto.
know.
Yeah,
How's the weather and everything over there?
it's pleasant today. Lots of sun.
Yeah, it's starting to warm up, so hopefully things will get
Yeah,
better on the whole fire side and things. But
yeah.
anyway, so I'm very excited to have you again. And just tell us a little bit about your professional background. Where did you start? What are you doing now? How did you get here, and so on. So
Oh, I'll be happy to do that. So I completed my master's in wireless communication from Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Delhi, India, way back in 2005. And after that, I joined the industry, and it's now 15 years of extensive experience in the industry, working across many different verticals, industries, roles. Like, so I've worked in oil and gas, I've worked in embedded systems, app networking, application development. I've worked as program manager, software developer, team lead, manager, and stuff like that. I'll give a brief overview of my career into three phases, which is like split of 15 years into 5 years. So my first 5 years were spent primarily into telecom. I was developing algorithms for 3G stack and primarily using C assembly code and stuff like that. And the next 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, I was primarily into cloud computing, backend development, application programming, the regular C++, Java, Python tools. And the last 5 years, I have honed, I have elaborated my skills on cloud computing, added more backend skills, as well as added machine learning into my skills, into the skill set for the last couple of years. The transition into machine learning happened like 4 years or so. I was like, curious about what machine learning is, and Andrew Ng's course on Coursera is, I think, everyone's stepping stone, everyone's little baby steps. And then uh, uh, I was interviewing for a company, an oil and gas company called Exxon Mobil, which is the oil and gas a major. They were opening a dev center in Bangalore, and they were looking for people who had software expertise, who had stats, maths, foundations of machine learning expertise. And that's how the transition happened. And then I moved to Toronto in September of 2017 and joined TradeRev as the tech lead for machine learning team. So that's how I've like progressed my career across.
so in your most recent role, what was your focus as a tech lead at TradeRev?
So I think let me give you a background on what TradeRev is. So and then I'll come to how TradeRev is using machine learning, right? So TradeRev is you can think of it as an online auction platform for used cars. It's into B2B space. So rather than auctioning cars, so rather than dealers auctioning cars on during physical auctions, they use TradeRev's online platform. So think about it as an eBay platform for dealer to dealer car transaction. So now machine learning basically comes into picture to give a confidence on the car for the dealer. Some regular use cases are price prediction, regression problems, recommendation systems, computer vision problems of identifying, the views of a car from videos and stuff like that. So that's how where machine learning is fitting into overall TradeRev scheme of things. Now, my role in TradeRev was very unique. I was primarily responsible for machine learning product delivery, which is basically taking research to production. So I was leading a machine learning team, and I was involved in all the stages of the machine learning product lifecycle, which is initially, ideation with the product team for, what is the solution you're looking for, or what is the problem you have. Then collaborating with data scientists, data engineers, building prototypes, then choosing what AWS services are here and there, and then taking the prototype to a polished solution. That's one big chunk of my work, which involved a lot of hands-on coding, launch AWS cloud architecture. So our tech stack was primarily Python, scikit-learn, TensorFlow, and the normal libraries. Um, the other thing which I had was also scoping of the project, the work breakdown, allocation of resources. I was mentoring and coaching the team on agile practices, how we apply agile into data science, what are the software engineering best practices, the unit testing stuff. It was a mix of 70-30 split between, hands-on lead and management role. So I was also instrumental in implementing some best practices from scratch, like CI/CD in the machine learning space, model monitoring. How do we actually monitor our model? They're degrading or they're improving. Unit testing was a big thing for machine learning products or projects, and our products were actually used in the for TradeRev's business. So as an example, the price prediction. So whenever a car is listed, the bidding has to start. So what's the initial bid? What's a good initial bid? It cannot be low. It cannot be too high. So that's one of the things.
I actually really like your emphasis on the last part of the technical having impact on the business, because that's something that we don't really talk as much about, I feel, in the data science industry. So is there any like numbers or kind of like a sort of figure that you can refer to in terms of like the impact it had, and just in general, if you can speak about the business application that is really, I think, paramount in the data science field?
I think one of the important things of taking research to production is how the machine learning system actually impacts the business. And in our case, all of our machine learning in production was having a direct impact to the business. So as an example, I'll talk of recommender systems. So a recommender system for is a very basic thing, right? Based on my previous history, what new items I'm interested in. So based on the previous history of the dealer, what cars he's interested into, what cars he's buying, we could help the customer sales team, specifically target only these dealers. Like, so based assuming this car has come for a trade, rather than focusing on, let's say, 100 of dealers, just focus on these 10 which is spit out by the recommender algorithm, and that used to reduce the time to close the deal. So that's the very direct impact of having machine learning in production. So you can focus your energies on a smaller subset and your success ratio improves. So that's one thing, very direct impact.
And this is more of a personal question. How do you keep abreast of all of the different technical and recent developments in the data science field with all the work that's going on around you?
Yeah, I think one of the good things about the field is I think we're very fortunate to live in an era of online learning, MOOCs, and YouTube. So the cream universities, MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, you talk of them, right? They have a lot of wonderful courses on YouTube or on their site. So I like um, deep learning in fundamentals of machine learning, computer vision, NLP, reinforcement learning, you name it. MIT, Stanford, or Coursera have excellent courses, and they're really good. uh, so that's one broad aspect, that they give you fundamentals as well as details of the courses. But if you want to do some regular digest, so TDS, like towards data science, is an excellent resource. There are newsletters from MIT which are condensed versions of a weekly digest. There are YouTube channels like from AWS, the Amazon Web Services, or TensorFlow, which talk of applications of machine learning. And there's an excellent blog from Google AI which talks of lots of different things on machine learning. And you know there are so many resources, sometimes I just get lost with which resource to follow. But the good thing is we can uh, divide between the team, divide between persons, and then have a collaboration and then get a gist of what's happening. I mean, you cannot learn everything, but at an overview, at a high level, you can get most of it.
So that's something that's definitely a concern of mine, just because there's a wealth of information online.
Yes.
And the question is, like, how do you filter for the right amount of content that you need just for the word production cycle that you're involved in? So can you speak a little bit about that? Like, how do you just filter the right amount of information, right kind of information? How do you approach these kinds of questions?
So I think it's a great question. And uh, just to add on it, the success is not mine, it's a team's effort, right? So if a person has 24 hours in a day, right? And even if you spend 24 hours, you will not be able to digest everything. So you have to figure out, what you are interested in, what others are interested in, and what is relevant to the project. So maybe start from scanning the literature or scanning a couple of things in the libraries, or AWS or whatever, right? Just start small, see what it is. Uh, and I always like to compare it with a depth first search versus breadth first search. So if you're aware of graphs or trees, you have a depth first or a breadth first approach, right? So if you follow a depth first search, you're not going to finish anything. So a typical approach is do breadth first, explore things here and there, and once something is important to you, let's say I'm doing a project on regression and I figure out there are so many tons of regressions available, but maybe XGBoost is the new one in the thing, and there is something from AWS. Just explore a couple of things in that direction and then take it from there. And again, it's an iterative process. It's not that it is written in written in the rock or something. It's iterative. You do something, explore, do something, and keep exploring on that.
I love the fact that you're just leveraging software engineering concepts to just make more of the data science field and try to
Yes.
understand what's going on. And I actually want to just link that back with sort of the kind of the career aspects that you've touched on personally yourself, right? Just because there's a lot of folks who are, including me, who are not necessarily from data science traditional background, whatever that means. And in fact, a lot of them coming from, say, software engineering background like yourself, right? And so you have some personal experience in that, obviously. So do you have any advice for people who are interested in switching over to this field, especially, software development, or, if you can speak about QA or BA, just if you have any business analytics, so if you have any sort of words of advice for those kind of folks?
Yeah, of course. I keep getting asked this question in a couple of meetups which I go. So I think the very first thing to know is understand what are the various roles in the ML space or data science space or whatever you can call it, right? It's basically data driven space. So there is a role of a product manager, you have a software developer or a ML engineer, you have a data engineer, you have a researcher or a data scientist, and you have a BA. To understand, what are the different roles, and does it, which of the roles interest you, and what's your previous skill set. If you're a fresh out of college, right, it's easier for you to switch careers. But if you have, let's say, 10 years of experience, like I had like 10 to 12 years of experience before I moved in, right? So I had to leverage my software skills and had to learn more of the software behind it. So if uh, let's say you are a mechanical engineer or a biologist, right? So it's a domain expertise which you're bringing, and the beauty of ML is it is applicable to like every industry. Like it's just not applicable to software. I can talk about, let's say, drug discovery. If you're a biologist, right, machine learning is a tool. Can you speed up your drug discovery, or you can detect a new pattern? So marry the domain expertise along with the skill in machine learning. That's one thing that will boost your confidence. You need to identify the skill gap. So there is a role you're targeting, or there is a some career path you're targeting. So from today and let's say 2 years down the line, what's the skill gap you have? And take appropriate courses to level up, be it coding or math or domain expertise, whatever it can be, right? And assuming it's a software oriented role, so uh, do you know Python? If yes, no, learn some Python. I don't want to go into Python versus R. I'll say, personally take Python and just stick to it. Uh, Understand scikit-learn, build some models and focus on the applied part of ML, which is you have, let's say, a housing data set and you want to predict, right? Just with the existing scikit-learn, see if what you can build up. And slowly, you'll start networking with people, join meetups, talk to people, get their feedback. So it is again a very hands-on activity, whether you're a software developer or a product manager, and you have to go to the industry and I think Toronto is one of the best net communities. We have lots of events happening, and I'm very sure in other cities as well there are lots of events happening. And just try to focus to begin with. Try to focus on the role you're expecting, and later you can broaden your horizon. I mean, if you want to go into product development as a product manager, let's say, right? Maybe coding or maybe going to a PyTorch event, which is very technical, may not be beneficial for you as well. So pick and choose.
You know,
So
I kind of want to poke a little bit
mhm,
into this distinction that you're making, or this the topic that you're bringing up, which is about domain expertise. And this is
yes,
something that I get questioned a lot, which is how important is domain expertise compared to just learning all these different tools, right? And from what I'm kind of seeing, there's sort of like a two different perspective on this. One, which is, well, data science, you need to have domain expertise, whether that's in things like even let's say economics or language modeling, linguistics or something, right? And then you have this other kind of side that says, well, no, machine learning is a domain agnostic tool. It can be applied across different sectors. And I get asked this question a lot, which is, hey, which one is the more important perspective I need to take? Which one is true? Is there something can you comment on this, this distinction, and
um,
what do you think about this particular question?
yeah, I think even I keep getting asked this question, and my perspective is that right, there's no silver bullet here. If so, machine learning is nothing but it's stats, maths, and new libraries. So it's uh, age-old technique with new libraries, new ecosystem, new frameworks, and the with the available of more data and more compute, right? We get better results. That's in a nutshell, right? Now, uh, if you let's say don't have the domain expertise, right, and you just know the tools, you may start out right, and it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? So for marathon you need to have your fundamentals, right? So learning new running technique might be good, but do you have the stamina, which means that do you have the foundations of the domain expertise? So assuming let's say drug discovery, right? Since this is corona scenario, right? A person who is an expert in, let's say, scikit-learn or let's say TensorFlow, but he doesn't know anything of what a molecule is, I don't think he can, do wonders in drug discovery. But if there's a person who has a domain expertise in drug discovery or molecules or biology, right? If both of them can collaborate, so one person brings the domain expertise and the other brings the, let's say, machine learning expertise, right? Then you will have a bigger prospect of success rather than one person having domain expertise and having machine. There are unicorns, of course, which have all the skill set, but I think in average, if we build a team which has different skill set, that's the ratio of success improves.
Yeah, no, I like the fact that you bring up drug discovery, just because there's a lot of talk today about obviously the coronavirus, and there's a lot of folks who are doing modeling, whether it's regression
Yep.
or something. And there's, I believe there's quite a bit of a danger, right? When we're not fully understanding as data
Yes.
scientists, not
Yes.
understanding so much about the biological ramifications of what we're actually studying, and just kind of
Yes.
modeling and doing predictions on it without really understanding the expertise.
Yes. Yes.
And that's definitely one of the dangers that I see that's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people take this in isolation. I don't take it in isolation. It's a holistic approach to product or whatever we are building with ML. So it needs, like, assuming in finance, right? A person, if he doesn't have any economics background and he builds some models, and let's say tomorrow the stock market behaves weirdly, right? So some economics has to come into picture uh, in addition to the machine learning.
Definitely, definitely. And another topic that I'm really interested in is actually model production. It's something that you've kept raising up just because it's part of your expertise
Yeah,
as
yeah.
and my manager always says, hey, model production is definitely sort of the finish line for the data science pipeline or the data science lifecycle, right?
Yes.
So it's definitely a very important aspect of being a data scientist, right? So for those who are just trying to get into this field, for instance, or who are already in this field, what advice do you have on this particular aspect of data science?
Um, I think I'd like to quote Andrew Ng on this. I remember some talk of his sometime back in which he said, um, we know the ML works, the algorithms work, right? So now it's the time to take into production and monetize it. So which means that there is no doubt that ML like regression works, right? But what I've seen is the data scientists typically are just concerned about the model, the Jupyter notebook, and hyperparameters. So, so what I'll say is rather than just don't have a very narrow approach. Think about the business context, how the machine learning is fitting into the business as to begin with, because the machine learning is one part of the business. Let's say it's an app, or let's say Amazon, right? Recommender system may be one part of the business. It's not the business, right? So think how the entire model is gelled into production. Uh, so the other thing can be think about what it means to for the model to be in production. You know, your field data can have a different distribution than your training and test data. So if you don't have that mindset, what will happen if tomorrow bugs come? Let's say your prediction was way off, right? How are you going to debug it? So having that mindset and thinking about not just your Jupyter notebook, think about how the entire ecosystem, let's say cloud computing works, right? Can you improve your training? Can you improve your API? So there are different ways in which model can make predictions. So think about, can it be a Flask app, or it can be a very basic a batch prediction stuff. So expanding your horizon on production, and also seeking help from software engineers, because or DevOps who are deploying things day in day out. And is CI/CD applicable, not applicable? Those are the calls which like I had taken. But uh, so these are a couple of things which the researchers who are very focused on their model and model performance can take. I think the other thing I like to add is, if the data scientist has a mindset that the model is what impact the model will have on the ROI. So, and it then it can backtrack, like if the model is just living in a Jupyter notebook and it's not going to field, I don't think that has any use, and business is not going to gain from it. So those are a couple of things which people can take it.
Uh, yeah, I especially love your point on the ROI, and especially the business aspects and elements of just the model production itself. Just curious, like just the mindset that you talk about. Is this something that you look for personally when you are trying to build your own data science team? Because as a tech lead, I'm sure you must have lots of experience hiring data scientists. So just want to ask, what are the elements you yourself look for when you're trying to build not just only just your own team, but just a hiring approach in general?
Yeah, I think that's a a great question, because a good team leads to success. If you hire good people, your ratio of success increases, right? So what I personally like to do is I like to build a T-shaped team, which means that the letter T, or the alphabet T, which means that few of the members of the team I look for experts. They will be experts in either data science research, or software development, or machine learning, or something, right? And the rest of the team, of the rest of the members of the team are cross functional, which means they have a broad set of skills ranging from software development, applied machine learning, data engineering, cloud computing, and stuff like that. So when I started hiring for my team, like way back 2 years or so, Most of the machine learning engineers on my team, um, they or like who are now machine learning engineers, they were earlier software developers. They didn't knew Python, they didn't knew scikit-learn, uh, and they didn't knew any other stuff like even basic stats. But they were curious in the field and they had good skills in software engineering. And the data scientist guy which I hired, they didn't knew what cloud computing is, what Docker is, you know. So, but I picked on their skill set, which can be cross pollinated. And then over time what has happened is, the team has become a well balanced team where uh, the software engineers have become machine learning engineers, and the data scientists can now release their code into production directly. So everyone has added skill. But so these are some of the like the things I try to do for building a team, right? But when it comes to the interviewing part, right, uh, the fundamentals of CS, like computer science, data science algorithms for software developers, and for data scientists or machine learning engineers, the fundamentals of stats or maths or machine learning um, is basically what I try to look for. And can do they know what neural network is, rather than just writing it in a couple of lines of keras? Do they really can they draw it on the board and then gonna explain it to me, and what back propagation is and stuff like that, right? So those are a couple of things I look in, like when I'm building my team.
It's I think we kind of touched upon this, but I still want to ask you anyway. You talk a lot about what you look for in a data scientist, curiosity, having basic fundamentals, and so on. But what are the things you conversely don't look for? In other words, like, what are some of the mistakes that you see a lot of data scientists make, especially those who are trying to become one in the interview process?
Yeah. So I think I'll just take a step back from it and then give a holistic perspective on hiring, maybe. So the hiring typically starts with getting a lot of resumes from the recruiter. Sometimes it's the external recruiter or internal recruiter. Uh, then doing phone screening, and then as well as on-site screening. So everything is a funnel, right? So you get, let's say, hundreds of resumes, and then you narrow down to 20 for phone screening and maybe 5 for on-site. So the one of the mistakes I've seen in the resumes is people are just mentioning everything in machine learning. They have done computer vision, they have done regression, they have done recommender systems, reinforcement learning. So writing one projects on it. I mean, it's not bad, but then what's your core skill in what are you bringing to the table if I'm going to interview you, right? It's good to have a broader perspective, but pinpoint that I am expert in this with a broader perspective or broader knowledge. The couple of things I've seen in phone screening and on-site interview is bad communication and collaboration skills. So for me, collab uh, communication and collaboration, teamwork skills is the utmost important. So see, development is a iterative activity. It's not in isolated. You're not sitting on an isolated island and coding it, right? It may work for an individual for some time, but as a team you have to communicate and collaborate, right? So if someone, like if I ask someone that explain me a basic neural network or regression, and if that person cannot explain me, right, that's a red flag for me. Because you know tomorrow if I hire and this guy has to talk to the product people, most of the product guys or let's say QAs, they don't have the fundamentals of math, so we need to explain them into very layman terms. So if you cannot explain a neural network or a regression in a layman terms, it's a red flag for me. And on collaboration, yeah, right. um, so the other thing is uh, conflict resolution and arrogance is it goes hand in hand. So if the person is boasting about my model was the best, it did lot of things, and if I say that no, okay, you did XGBoost, maybe did you try random forest, and why did you not try random forest? So if he's not listening to alternatives given by me, right, that also goes back to the teamwork, that it's a cross functional work, and if you're not open to any feedback, how are you going to interact with the broader team, where you have 4 data scientists, 4 machine learning engineers, everyone is going to give their feedback. And if you're not open or receptive to feedback, that's another red flag for me. um, the other thing on like one thing on technical is, if I basically try to ask simple things, let's say, in your previous project, let's say, what trade-off or choices you made between various algorithms or models. Let's say uh, it was a regression problem. You had 10 different regressors. What made you choose this one? Or it was a classification problem. Or let's say a recommender system, right? Why did you went with this approach when you had 10 different approaches? In computer vision, you have so many models available. Which one are you choosing? And do you understand the implication of this model on the data as well as on the end user? uh, let's say in computer vision, if you use a TF Lite model, it can fit into a mobile phone, right? So that way, so if you cannot explain those trade-offs, it means that you're not understanding what's happening. You're just using a library and then building something without uh, actually having the curiosity to open the hood, open the trunk, and see what's happening. So and the other thing is, I also like to see how curious the person is he reading something on the side or during as part of his work? What's the latest book he has read, or a latest paper, or latest uh, library he's gone to? So if those things are not coming correctly, then that those are some of my red flags personally. um, and I think people are technically fine, but they do lack some of these skills. uh, so I think this will help people as well, and broader people as well.
No, I think those are really great points, just because I do see that there is some assumptions that people make where they see data scientists as being more like researchers. They're kind of siloed off, doing their own
Yeah.
individual thing, just trying to push the model accuracy by 2% by
Yes.
feature engineering. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of cross collaborative efforts,
Yes.
and communication is definitely key to the success of your career in general, right?
Yeah, I think in general, yes, but in data science, I think it gains more importance because uh, the 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 focus of a data scientist is to like um, get the crux out of data. So can he detect the pattern out of data? Assuming he can, right? But can he communicate to a layman or to, let's say, the business, how your data can be used or what pattern can be there? So and it's very difficult to put that into a document, right? So you have to have good communication skills along with your good visualization skills.
No, and that's a great way to finish this interview. I'm actually out of questions. Do you have any final kind of words for the TDS audience, or any other points you want to make? The space is open to you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think two things before I think we close. Um, I wanted a perspective from you as well, since you are in the Bay Area, right? Which particular companies excite you in this field? Uh, like which AI companies you like or follow or excite you in the Bay Area? Eh,
Yeah. I think that's a great question. So I'm actually I am very interested in H2O.ai, just because they
I
have
see. Yeah,
auto ML going on. They have an
yeah,
off mountain view. It's a huge thing. I do want to take a step back and say that data scientists, I don't know how it is in Toronto, but in San Francisco, it has kind of different meanings, just because a lot of the big tech companies have changed a lot of the titles. So,
yeah.
uh, for instance, in Lyft, they had a public post about this on Medium where they said that their data analysts will be considered data scientists, and then their data scientists will be called research scientists now.
I see. I
And
see.
so the research scientist is now becoming like this new data scientist or machine learning scientist. So there's a lot of kind of confusion that's happening, especially in the Bay Area, in terms of what these different terms mean. And a lot of interests are happening with Berkeley students who are majoring in data science, for instance, and there's a whole bunch of them, and they want to become data scientists, right out of college. So there's a lot of things happening there. I think that context is important for kind of understanding my view of different AI
Hmm.
companies here in general, just because it's really hard to kind of separate what is, like machine learning based data science versus analytics based data science and so on. So that's kind of the thing happening, I think, as a Bay Area culture in general.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's great to know actually. Okay, and I think I'll add just one more thing. I'm very curious to know how's your journey so far into data science, because you also, made a transition to data science.
Yeah, yeah. So my transition was actually quite different because I was originally trying to go into diplomacy. I started out at the United Nations, and that's kind of where I wanted to go. So my master's was like on international economics and politics, and I was very interested in economic policy and so on. Um, Started at the UN, didn't really feel like it was a good fit at all. So I was like, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna leave. So I ended up coming back to the Bay Area. I went to Berkeley as an undergrad. And I just ratcheted up my skills. I was doing some analytics work anyway at the United
Mhm.
Nations, so I think it was a good kind of transition for me. And towards data science was actually quite interesting, just because I wrote a bit of uh, articles, and they ended up becoming they gained quite a bit of attention.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And there's some of my personal projects that I did, and they were actually quite instrumental in the my transition as a data scientist, just because it made me stand out. And it may be something that if I can add in terms of the whole career aspect is just two things. One, which is that there really isn't a boundary yet. You don't have to have a data science PhD,
yeah,
master's, and so on to get into the field. Just speaking personally for me. And the second thing is that a lot of people ask, which projects do I need to do in order to get into XYZ company? And I think that's the wrong question to ask. The real question is like, what projects are you interested in personally,
yes,
right?
yes,
So my projects were on just music. I'm a musician. I play piano. So a lot of my projects were just doing stuff, data science on music. And it caught a
yep,
lot
yep,
of people. I had nothing to do with music. But it kind of goes back to your point about showcasing curiosity, interest, because these are the things that you will do just on the side, right? Like you don't have to
yeah,
be a 9 to 5 job. Just kind of stuck with that. These are things you'll do after work on weekends and so on. And it will definitely showcase during the
oh, yeah,
interview process.
yeah. Curiosity, passion, interest. Those are the things to get into data science for sure.
Definitely.
It was really nice talking to you, Haebichan. Yeah, and I think before we end, I like to thank the pioneers of software development as well as machine learning data science. Uh, they have really helped the community in general, and I think most of our careers are based on them on and their teachings, right? So I like to thank all of them.
Oh, yeah, that's a great way to end this interview. So thanks again for joining, Amit.
Thank you so much, Haebichan. You have a great day ahead. See
All
you.
right,
Bye bye.
take care.